Welcome to this presentation about environmental justice in the Appalachian region. My name is Tom Hansell, and I'm professor at the Center for Appalachian Studies here at Appalachian State University, and I'm also a documentary filmmaker. If you're not familiar with our Center for Appalachian Studies, we're an interdisciplinary center and academic program that works to connect people on campus to the region that we're all a part of. We also have a master's degree that offers two concentrations, one on Appalachian culture and music and the other in sustainability in Appalachia. So as you can see, much of our center's work really focuses on the intersections of culture, sustainability, and environmental justice in Appalachia, which is why I'm glad to be able to talk to you about it today. I think it helps as we talk about environmental justice in Appalachia to understand that this region is very rich in natural resources. Timber, minerals, natural gas have all been extracted from this region for well more than a century. Unfortunately, a little wealth has remained, and I think that helps set the stage for some of these environmental justice issues that we'll talk about today. I also think it helps to be clear when we talk about environmental justice, what we mean. So I'm going to offer the definition of environmental justice from the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. The federal EPA defines environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. The EPA goes on to explain that they believe the goal of environmental justice will be achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards and equal access to the decision-making process to have a healthy environment in which to live, learn, and work. So as we talk about environmental justice issues today, I'm going to break the presentation into three parts. Obviously, equal access to clean air and water is central to the concept of environmental justice, and that's most of what we're going to talk about today. However, an often overlooked aspect of environmental justice involves workplace health and safety. So to address this, I'll provide a brief overview of labor organizing in the Appalachian coalfields and make connections between labor and environmental justice. And finally, we're going to also talk about a concept that people call a just transition. And this term applies the principles of environmental justice to society's transitions from fossil fuels to renewable energy. A just transition will provide an equal opportunity for communities that have been reliant on coal and other fossil fuels to build a sustainable economy. As we think about the place-based principles of a just transition in the Appalachian region, it's important to understand how the historical development of the region, including the migration of a large number of people into the region to work in extractive industries, connects to present-day environmental justice issues. A clear view of the past helps us understand how to address these issues and how to plan for a sustainable future. So let's start with a quick history of the Appalachian coalfields, including the migration of large numbers of African American people into the region a century ago to work in the railroads and coal mines. This clip from my documentary After Coal features residents of the town of Lynch, Kentucky in Harlan County discussing their own history.
The coal fields of eastern Kentucky were developed in the early 20th century. Some of the nation's biggest companies, such as U.S. Steel, built entire towns from the ground up to supply coal to their mills.
These company towns attracted a diverse group of immigrants to work in their mines. In Lynch, Kentucky, U.S. Steel provided houses, schools, and hospitals for their workers. A combination of private ownership and racial segregation helped coal companies control their growing labor force.
That's all history right there, about the little trunks and everything. And U.S. Steel had a mine here. They had a guy named, they called him Limehouse. And he would go and get the black people in Alabama and bring them to lynch by night. The reason he had to do it by night because it was illegal for him what he was doing. And that's how most of the blacks that work in the coal mine here, most of them came from Alabama.
I'm pretty sure my dad's parents was raised here, but their parents came from Italy. And the reason they came over here was to work in the coal mines. Everyone, like both my mama and dad's family, has grown up either in Cumberland or Lynch.
When they first started in Lynch, they had a big store called the Commissary. And if you worked for Lynch, that's the only place you could spend your money. They didn't give you no money, they gave you a script. They had a hard way to go. And they weren't making about $2 or $3 a day.
Dangerous working conditions and lack of democracy led coal miners to organize into industrial unions. In both regions, mine owners attempted to block the rising tide of unionism, and miners had to literally fight for their right to unionize.
In Harlan County, Kentucky, violent conflicts between miners and the coal companies in the 1930s helped bring national attention to the need for workers' rights. Publicity generated by the Harlan Mine Wars helped urge Congress to pass the National Labor Relations Act.
After the miners' right to organize was guaranteed, the United Mine Workers of America became the largest union in the nation. Solidarity among union members helped coalfield communities survive hard times.
So these stories of migration and labor organizing really helped build political and economic power in the coalfields. Unfortunately, the mechanization of the coal mining industry after World War II led to many layoffs, and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people left the region, and a lot of those political gains during the first half of the 20th century were lost during the second half of the 20th century. This next clip tells a little bit more of that story.
In the U.S., the United Mine Workers of America was at the peak of its political power after World War II. The gains made by organized labor during this period helped millions of American families enter into the middle class. The experiences of union organizing also taught coalfield residents about the strength of community.
You know, I was born and raised here in Lynch in 1946. In 46, it was still pretty much the pick and shovel, the cutting machine. They cut the coal on the bottom, you know, cut and shoot, and then hand load and all that. At that time, there was 10,000 people living in this little town of Lynch, Kentucky.
The economic gains made by Appalachian miners after World War II were short-lived. Increasing mechanization of the coal industry led to job loss, labor unrest, and outmigration.
In the 1950s, that's when a transition came. You know, they started modernizing the mining equipment. It started getting better. They had the continuous miner came on board. And all this time, they were needing less and less people to run the mines.
They brought the big machines in and they were just beginning to strip mine. And about half the population left here between 1955 and 65 to seek employment other places. And so it was a period of great change in the coal fields when I came. And it's been changing ever since.
So this history of mechanization of the coal industry and outmigration from the coal fields affected many of the issues that we see in the region today. One example is black lung. If you're not familiar with black lung, doctors call it coal miners' pneumoconiosis. And it's a disease that prevents the body from absorbing oxygen into the lungs and moving it into your bloodstream. Black lung is caused by long-term exposure to coal dust, or tiny particles of coal that are suspended in underground coal mines or in coal preparation plants where miners work. Black lung can be prevented by dust suppression equipment in coal mines, such as water sprayers on mining equipment. Monitoring a miner's exposure to coal dust also helps prevent black lung. There's been a sharp increase in black lung in recent years, and investigative reporters have discovered that cases were underreported for many years. Once a miner contracts black lung, it's considered fatal. A federal law designed to protect miners from black lung was passed in 1969, but the disease is still a problem today. There have been documented issues with coal companies falsifying dust samples from their mines, and there's also documented instances of coal companies paying doctors to testify that miners do not have black lung. Individual miners don't have as much financial clout as coal companies. And when low-income people are disproportionately affected by a workplace safety issue such as black lung, I believe that it becomes an issue of environmental justice. So the history of mechanization of the coal industry did not just affect coal miners and black lung, it also affected entire communities. The most extreme form of mechanization is mountaintop removal coal mining, which has created a number of issues related to environmental justice in Appalachia. Now, mountaintop removal is a form of coal mining that extracts coal from the surface instead of underground. The process of mountaintop removal mining starts with clear-cutting the land to remove trees and all other vegetation. Once the trees are removed, explosives are used to blast away the mountain and expose the seams of coal underground. The coal is gathered in giant scoops and shovels and then trucked off to power plants. The rocks that were on top of the coal are pushed into the valley, filling streams, and about 1,500 miles of streams in Appalachia have been buried under these valley fills. Communities near mountaintop removal mines struggle with a number of environmental justice issues, including access to clean drinking water and air pollution. Recent research has documented higher rates of heart and lung disease in communities near mountaintop removal mines. As these are primarily low-income communities, a lack of access to healthcare facilities compounds these issues and connects them to the EPA's definition of environmental justice. Now, many people will ask, how is this legal? Or why doesn't the government step in and stop these companies from doing mountaintop removal? Well, the federal government did pass a law regulating strip mining way back in 1977. And that law required coal companies to get a permit from the government before mining. And in order to get that permit, the company had to show how they would protect water quality, reclaim the land back to its original contour, and they also had to post a bond to pay for any reclamation that they couldn't complete. However, the law had a loophole, and that loophole allowed coal companies to not put the land back to the original contour if it was to be developed for higher or better use. So this loophole allowed the coal companies to basically leave the top of the mountains flat and essentially legalize the process of mountaintop removal coal mining. So the coal-related issues that we've been talking about so far primarily affect communities in eastern Kentucky or southern West Virginia and perhaps southwestern Virginia. However, coal ash is an environmental justice issue that affects communities here in North Carolina. And the health impacts of coal ash disproportionately affect African American communities, which connects it to our discussion of environmental justice. If you're not familiar with coal ash, it's basically just what it sounds. It is ash that's left over after burning coal in power plants to produce electricity. Now, this ash contains heavy metals, materials like arsenic or lead, mercury or chromium, and exposure to these toxic materials will increase the risk of heart disease, cancer, and stroke, and it can also lead to permanent brain damage in children. Historically, coal ash has been stored near the coal-fired power plants that produce the ash, and here in North Carolina, coal ash was commonly placed in unlined pits or piled up near power plants. However, this storage was not safe, and recent spills have led to increased scrutiny of coal ash by environmental regulators. The Dan River ash spill was a recent example. Mary Ann Hitt, director of the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign, described the spill. She writes, "On October 2nd, 2014, a Duke Energy coal pit spilled more than 39,000 tons of toxic coal ash into North Carolina's Dan River, creating an emergency and raising concerns about environmental and economic impacts to communities for miles downstream." Now, the Dan River coal ash spill focused public attention on the dangers of coal ash, and after the spill, 14 sites owned by Duke Energy were identified as potential threats to drinking water and rivers throughout the state. Belews Creek, near Winston-Salem, was one of the most dramatic sites. Ridge Graham, from the group Appalachian Voices, writes, "Belews Creek houses a 12 million ton lagoon of ash in a 280-acre ravine that is over 160 feet deep. The bottom of the ash pond is sitting on the groundwater table in violation of the Clean Water Act." In 2016, Duke Energy admitted that high levels of arsenic, beryllium, cobalt, lithium, and radium were detected in the groundwater at the Belews Creek Power Station. This groundwater provides drinking water for the historically African American community nearby, providing an example of how communities of color often bear the environmental costs of polluted air and water, while the rest of the society reaps the benefits of cheap electricity. After the Dan River ash spill focused attention on coal ash, residents near 14 ash sites in North Carolina, including Belews Creek, organized to demand action. Statewide legislation was proposed to clean up coal ash sites and protect drinking water. And public hearings were held across the state to discuss problems with coal ash pollution. As a result, the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality and Duke Energy entered into an agreement to close 14 coal ash sites across the state. However, this process is slow and complicated, and many residents fear that it's just not enough to fix decades-old environmental problems. So one of the most controversial environmental justice issues, not just in Appalachia, but throughout the U.S., is the fracking of natural gas and then the building of natural gas pipelines to transport that product to market. The northern region of Appalachia, particularly West Virginia and some of Pennsylvania and Ohio, contains massive reserves of natural gas. And the process to use to retrieve this natural gas is called fracking, which can contribute to groundwater pollution and other environmental problems. In addition to fracking in northern Appalachia, proposed pipelines, closer to home here in southern Appalachia, have also raised issues of environmental justice in the region. Now, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline was a natural gas pipeline that Duke Energy and Dominion Power proposed to run 600 miles from West Virginia through Virginia into eastern North Carolina. This pipeline's path would have taken it through several historically African American communities, including Union Hill, Virginia, a town of historic value because it became a freedmen's community after the Civil War. Duke Energy and Dominion Power planned to build a compressor station in this historic site. However, a coalition of local, regional, and national groups organized against the pipeline and challenged it in court. And in July 2020, Duke Energy and Dominion Power announced that they were canceling the Atlantic Coast Pipeline project, citing uncertainties about costs, permitting, and pending court cases. However, a second pipeline project is still alive in our region. The Mountain Valley Pipeline is a natural gas pipeline system that spans approximately 300 miles from northwestern West Virginia to southern Virginia. And the proposed pipeline would be 42 inches in diameter, or larger than the Keystone XL pipeline that's made national news. The construction zone for the Mountain Valley Pipeline is 125 feet wide and will cut through the Jefferson National Forest, the Appalachian Trail, and the Blue Ridge Parkway. The pipeline was announced in 2014 and approved by the government in 2017, but it remains incomplete as courts review several environmental permits. A broad-based coalition has formed to fight the Mountain Valley Pipeline. In addition to formal environmental groups, many informal groups have taken direct action, such as setting up tree stands in the pipeline's path to stop construction. A group of activists have occupied the Yellow Finch tree sit in Elliston, Virginia for more than 2 years, and as I speak, they're still there. As a result, the Mountain Valley Pipeline is behind schedule, over budget, and its future remains uncertain. The story of citizens successfully organizing around environmental justice issues such as coal ash landfills or the Atlantic Coast Pipeline provides hope to people working on other environmental justice issues in the region. And although there's much work to be done, I also believe that the Just Transition movement provides hope as we try to connect environmental justice issues to the movement to address climate change. If you're interested in finding out more about any of these issues, I've included a set of web links at the end of this video, and you can feel free to check out these additional websites. You can also feel free to contact me to learn more about some of these issues or to learn more about the Center for Appalachian Studies. So I'd like to thank the Apps Heritage Council for inviting me to do this video, and would like to thank you all for taking the time to watch it, and hope that we can all find ways to make our region a better place to live. I'm Tom Hansell from the Center for Appalachian Studies. Thanks for watching.